Hey Coastal, welcome to the Theology of Music video series. Make sure you like and subscribe, hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all that we're posting, and share this video on Facebook so you and your friends can continue to learn more about the songs that we sing and the theology within them. Welcome to the Theology of Music video series in which we unpack the theology in the songs that we sing. Buckle up, this one's going to be crazy. Today I'm going to look at the song Great Is Thy Faithfulness. It's a wonderful, wonderful hymn. And I would love to give you guys a lot of context between who wrote it and stuff, but we're just jumping right in. I want to take a look at the first verse, and it says this: Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. James 1:17 is where that no shadow of turning comes from, where it says this: Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Today I'm going to talk about the doctrine of divine impassibility. So if you're looking for a nice, light, happy, just
fun little video about us and Jesus.
I guess it's technically still, depending on what you really like. I mean, whatever floats your boat. But so the doctrine of divine impassibility is this: that God does not experience emotional changes either from within or affected by his relationship to creation. Layman's terms, we don't make God feel things. God doesn't experience emotions as we would interpret them. So you might be thinking that doesn't make any sense, or it does make sense. And so throughout the history of our faith, there have been a lot of people against that belief. In fact, one of them, named Jürgen Moltmann, said this: A God who cannot suffer is poorer than any man, for a God who is incapable of suffering is a being who cannot be involved. Suffering and injustice do not affect him. And because he is so completely insensitive, he cannot be affected or shaken by anything. He cannot weep, for he has no tears. But the one who cannot suffer cannot love either, so he is a loveless being. Some of you might have even identified with that. You might think, well, if God can't feel, then I can't worship a God that doesn't feel. Actually, it's the opposite. Would you want a God who could be swayed and changed based on how we lived or how the world went or all those kinds of things? Is that God truly sovereign? But here's the thing. When we think about God's emotions, John Calvin says it best. He says this: when God makes accommodation for us in showing emotion, this is what he means. Now, the mode of accommodation is for him, God, to represent himself to us, not as he is in himself, but as he seems to us. Although he is beyond all disturbance of mind, whenever we hear that God is angered, we ought not to imagine any emotion, i.e. passion, in him, but rather to consider that this expression has been taken from our own human experience. You might have heard the thing: God regretted that he made Israel. God regretted that he gave them a king. God regrets. God is angry. God is weeping. God is sorrowful. All these things. This should cause us to worship and rejoice more in the Lord, because he not only condescended to us through his son's death on the cross and saved us that way, but he condescended to us through speaking our language. It's often said, think about it like this: you don't talk to a baby in a PhD format vocabulary. No, you speak to them in baby talk. I don't go to my daughter Lucy and say,
So Lucy, the divine impassibility of God's a fantastic doctrine in which I believe it's pernicious for us to even believe the opposite. What do you think about eternal security in predestination?
No, I say, la la goose. That's what I say to my daughter. God condescended through his son and condescended in his holy word. It doesn't mean that he made it any less true. It doesn't mean that he is any less himself. He is literally just bringing it out towards us in the regards of, now we can interpret it, now we can understand it in a way that is easier for us. That's a gracious God to me. That's not a God that is unloving. That's not a God that's unmoved. That's a wonderful God. The God of the universe, who created everything, in whom there is no shadow or turning, saw fit to reveal himself through his word in a way that we could understand. Here's a couple of things it shouldn't do. It shouldn't make us look at Scripture as having error. Scripture is inerrant, meaning it doesn't have error. Well, Joel was written by man. God breathed. That Scripture should inform Scripture. And if you're not letting Scripture inform Scripture and you're just letting your feelings inform Scripture, I'm telling you right now, you're wrong. You're just wrong. Like, there's no way around it. You're just wrong. Scripture informs Scripture. So when Scripture tells us that all Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, anyone who says, well,
God, I know God spoke it, but man wrote it.
you're wrong. You're just wrong. God's divine impassibility, his inability to change, his always, all the time, every attribute that he is. What I mean by that is he's always love, he's always just, he's always fill in the blank. It's not he's loving one moment, now he's just. They're all happening simultaneously at all times because he is God. All these things should cause us to have greater worship on a Sunday. So when we sing, "Great is thy faithfulness," we are worshiping a God who does not change based on our own experiences, based on any event throughout history. Yeah, that's a faithful God. So church, I really hope that when you worship this Sunday and you sing "Great is thy faithfulness," you believe that there is truly no shadow of turning within the Lord. And because of that, there is such great cause to worship him. Church, worship the great and faithful God who does not experience emotions like you do. So when you're anxious, and when you're depressed, and when you're angry, and when you're suffering, God knows what you're going through, but he does not change because of it. And so even though you change, and you'll probably feel better or maybe worse tomorrow, and then maybe better or maybe worse the next day, God hasn't changed. God will never change. And so you can truly say, "Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me." God bless you guys. See you Sunday.